What's up, everybody? It's Dan, Binder Boneyard, coming at you from the new office. A lot of stuff has changed the last few weeks. I am now upstairs in the shop. The upstairs office was originally the sales room and Josie's office. And, at the time when we moved into this space, that made sense. But as the sales have grown and the business is shifting direction, we have had to change that layout. So brought in a 40-foot container, dropped that next to the shop, moved all of the sales inventory into the container, moved Josie's office downstairs to where mine used to be. And now I have taken over the upstairs, which means I have a bigger office now for all of my collectible memorabilia, junk, and crap. And she has a smaller office, but it is cleaner, better layout, and allows her the opportunity to pack and ship easier because she is separated from all of the inventory now. So, because before she was having to pack and ship with all of the room full of inventory. So, big changes, good changes. It's working out well so far. We've officially been set up like this for about a week. Now, I am still settling into my space, hanging stuff, putting books on shelves, getting just stuff taken care of. So, yeah, it's been a thing, but I'm grateful that I had the opportunity and was able to make it happen. So thank you, everybody, for your patience. If you were trying to buy stuff or if you were calling for, to purchase something or whatever. But yeah, so we're back 100% operational and stoked to be set up like this. So I appreciate everybody's patience and I'm excited for, this change now brings us into 2026. And I hate the whole new year, new me BS, but starting fresh on 26 is going to be helpful. We have some big plans. I'm going to be making some more changes to the layout, the sales platforms, how we approach sales and marketing. So you're going to see a lot from us here in the coming months, because it's really time to take it to the next level. The sales we've been kind of, I don't want to say we've been treading water. We're definitely not losing any money on it, but it's time to, now that we've got the streamline set up, it's a good time to capitalize on that and really grow. So so you're going to see a lot more of that. But anyway, I appreciate everybody, all the Patreon supporters, the Instagram subscribers, all those little dollars help. Again, this costs me money to make this free service that I provide, that people send me messages and, hey, do one about this and do one about that I have to pay for to make these. So, it's nice when I get a little bit of love from the audience to help offset the cost of doing these, because it does, like I said, it does cost me money. So anyway, all that being said, thank you. And now on to today's topic. I did one a few weeks ago about electricals in internationals. And there were a lot of feedback about aftermarket setups and accessories and things like that. And so I think this one's going to be about aftermarket stuff. And wiring is one of those really questionable things, because you get guys and girls and people are just, they get set in their ways. They get set in what they think is right. They think, a certain way, or they get a brand name stuck in their head and they think that's the only way to go. And, there's a lot of opinions on wiring, whether they're right or they're wrong or whatever. I don't know. I can tell you that no one is rewired. No, I shouldn't say no one, but very few people have rewired as many internationals as we have. And, and there's a difference, I believe, in the way that we do stuff versus the way that other shops do stuff, But anyway, I'm not going to get into that. But what I am going to just get into is the variations of aftermarket stuff and the way that we do things and why we do them the way we do them. I am a huge fan of the Quickwire brand harnesses because they are USA made with USA parts. Quickwire has a large military contract, and the military contract specs out that the items have to have a certain, they have to be made in America. They have to meet a certain standard. They have to have a certain quality. And I know guys that were in the military are rolling their eyes because mil spec doesn't always mean the best. Mil spec sometimes just means who won the contract. And, if you've ever driven a mil spec Humvee or a mil spec AMRAP, they're terrible. So I know that doesn't mean a lot, but what I like about the Quickwire is that it's real copper wire. It's good gauges. It's a good kit. Most of our Scout rewires get the 14 circuit, and then we add a couple of circuits for various accessories, because the next one up from them, I think, is a 22 circuit or a 20 circuit. And that has like power door locks and power windows and, stuff like that we don't use. It's a waste of circuits because I don't like to rename circuits. I see sometimes, and I think we've done this in the past, and it's why I don't like to do it now, is you go, oh, this truck doesn't have power windows, so I'm going to repurpose this power window circuit to be it's going to run the auxiliary 12 volt power for the power ports in the center console. So now you have to, scribble out what it is on the fuse panel identifier plate and then write in what you think it's for. And, the wiring is labeled. All of these harnesses have the circuit written on them every 6 inches or something. So now in the future, if you ever have to get into there, and you're like, why doesn't my power port work? And then, you crawl under there, your shop crawls under there, and they see this wire that's labeled power windows. Be like, well, that's not it. And then they just move on to the next one. Or, it takes them a long time to figure out that this one labeled power windows is actually your center console power. I don't like to make it any more complicated than it already is. So, we try to avoid renaming circuits. It's not helpful. I understand you budget guys and things like that are trying to make do with what you got, but we are a professional shop trying to do a professional job. And so we don't do shortcuts like that. I think we had done it in the past, and like I said, it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, and that's why we don't do it anymore. So the reason I like quick wires over a painless is the gauge of wire on painlesses is too small, in my opinion. We've got a travel all in the shop right now that was redone by another shop that did a painless, and the wires aren't labeled clearly enough, often enough, and they are tiny. They're 18 to 20 gauge for many of the circuits. In my opinion, that's too small. And I don't like the way the fuse panel is laid out. It's not how I like it. It's just not. So we've done a couple of American Auto wires and not the specific Scout ones. We have not done one of the quote unquote, factory fit Scout American auto wire kits. I've just done the generics, that you used to be able to buy. And the crimps were terrible. The wire sizing was questionable on certain circuits, and the fuse panel was not my favorite either. So we only did a couple of those, and I decided I didn't want to do those anymore. An American Auto Wire has one where there's like it's like a junction panel where it's got set screws, and you put the wire in and then tighten the set screw down, and you can add as many circuits as you want or whatever. We had a customer bring us one of those harnesses, and it's just you're just asking for corrosion problems, and you're asking for, just connection issues and mislabeled circuits and stuff. So I won't ever do one of those again. We've gotten really good at doing the quick wires, and the quality of the kits has just been the best I've seen. So I don't, I'm not sponsored by Quickwire. We are a retailer for them, so we do get a, vendor break on them, but we definitely don't get anything for free from Quickwire. But anyway, these aftermarket kits, most of them don't come with accessory wiring. Like they'll have a hot wire that says, wipers. Okay, but now you need the wires that go from the wiper switch to the wiper motor. So if you tore all your wiring out of your truck and threw everything away, well, now you're stuck. Now you've got to figure out how to rewire from the switch back to the wiper motor. Same with the heater. There's a wire in the bundle that says heater, and then you have to wire from the switch to the heater itself. Most kits don't come with that. What's the other one? Oh, the dome light circuit on the Scouts and trucks. The dome light is hot all the time, 12 volt hot all the time. And then the ground is what actuates the light. So when you flick the little switch at the back of the travel top, or you rotate your headlight switch, all the way counterclockwise, that creates a ground and turns the light on. Or if you have the buttons on the doors, when you open the door, and it creates a ground and the light comes on. That is not included in any of the kits. There'll be a dome light wire, but that's it. So if you tore out everything, you need to reinstall everything. So you will have to add the ground wire back into your harness that runs from the headlight switch or the dome light buttons on the doors all the way back to where the dome light is. So I've seen more than one restored Scout with a new wiring harness that the dome light in the top doesn't work because they didn't realize that they had to run a ground all the way back there until it was too late. Or if it works on the switch only and it's not tied in with the rest of the truck, which it should be originally. So, pay attention to stuff like that. A lot of them are set up for stereos already, which is nice, but, the quick wires come with speaker wire. I don't know about the other ones, but you still have to, if you're running an amp or anything like that, you will need to add the wiring and the additional stuff for amp and sub and all those things. So, keep that in mind. When we do these, we also I run 2 accessory wires to the front of the truck and 2 accessory wires to the back of the truck, all the way to the back, from the dash, under the dash, all the way to the back, so that in the future, if you want to add an accessory, lights, whatever, the wiring is already there, and you don't have to cut into the harness, you don't have to splice anything, you don't have to zip tie new wires anywhere. There's already wiring tied up in the harness that's ready to go. So, and we label it. We have a special label printer that prints on the wiring. So it's in there. I got really frustrated with a customer one time that we had rewired his truck and we had done that. The wires were there. And he called me and he was like, "Hey, we keep blowing fuses on this one circuit. And I'm like, oh yeah, what's going on? And he says, oh, we took it to a stereo shop to have them add some stuff. And, now we're having all these problems, and come to find out that, they ignored our wires under the dash that had very large labels saying, additional circuits, and added their own and used Scotch locks on a power wire that isn't supposed to run an auxiliary radio, or they were running FM, transmitter radio, like, not a CB, but an FM radio. And they just Scotch locked into some other wires, and it created some problems. And, if they had just used the wires that we had set up and paid attention, then we wouldn't have had any of those problems. Or if the customer had called me and said, hey, we're taking it in to have this work done, anything, what should I recommend or tell the guys? I would have given them a heads up, but instead, they didn't. And then there were problems, and we don't warranty. If another shop gets in there and starts chopping into stuff, our warranty is void. I will not go in, and fix stuff. I mean, you can pay us to fix it, but we don't repair anything for free when another shop chops into stuff. A big request we get is for dual battery setups. And I like them. I run them on a fair amount of things. I really enjoy the security and peace of mind knowing I have a backup starter battery. A lot of times we wire the winch into the secondary battery. That way it can't kill the main battery if you're winching hard. And sometimes we run a lot of the accessories off the secondary battery. Again, if you leave the key on, you don't kill the battery and you can't start it. So, and the dual battery setup is normally run with a solenoid and a trigger wire, so that when the key is off, then the batteries are separated no matter what. And then when the truck is running, they are still separated, but both batteries are being charged. And then in the event that you need, like if you kill the main battery, then we have a disconnect switch that you can turn on that then joins both batteries together. And then that second battery becomes the starting battery, or vice versa. I don't recommend this, but if you're doing a lot of winching and you need both battery powers, then you can hit that switch and then you have both batteries to run the winch, but you run the risk of killing the truck when you do it that way. And so I always tell people, if you're trying to self-recover, like, don't turn both batteries on together, because you will run the risk of stranding yourself. So, but there's a special way and a special solenoid that we use to power that second battery without running the main battery dead. So that's something that we add a lot of. And as far as battery disconnects go, we definitely use them on the dual battery setups to isolate the batteries. And you only use metal ones, like the Kelsey Haynes ones or whatever. Do not buy the plastic Summit or Speedway ones with the red plastic key that you can take out. They're dangerous if you have a fire, or if they get overloaded and hot and they melt. And then when they melt, you can't take the key out. You can't turn them off. You can't do what you wanted to do with them because they have melted themselves together. Especially if you do have an accident or you do have a problem and you have a fire and that melts the thing. And then, you have to disconnect and you can't because it's melted. You always use the metal ones. And we use the commercial rated ones, that are good to 240 volts and stuff like that. As far as a disconnect for the truck, it's not a terrible idea if you leave the rig at your vacation cabin or in the woods for extended periods of time. That way, if you do have a rodent that gets in there and chews through something and creates an arc, it eliminates the dangers of that. But you need to have that disconnect fairly close to the battery Some guys like to have it in the cab so that you can kill everything when, if something bad happens. Other guys like to have it under the hood so it's out of sight. So a criminal or burglar, wants to steal your truck and you won't start or won't do anything. So then they leave it alone. It's just a safety thing. So it has potential. We don't install them, master shutoff switches. We don't install them unless a customer specifically asks for it. Normally, all of our battery terminals, we use the boat style with the wing nut so that you can undo it easily or quickly if there is a problem. And so we do use on some builds we'll do like the military terminals. Those require a wrench to disconnect the battery cable, but it's a good solid connection as well. It just depends on the end user. Like this overland traveler that we're building with the Cummins in it, that's getting a lot of military style stuff and definitely the dual battery setup and whatnot. But the weekend city cruiser coffee run Scout 2 that we built, it just got wing nut boat terminals on the battery and no disconnects or anything like that. The quick wires have an ignition kill switch on the fuse panel that is kind of hidden. And if you're worried about security, you can, that's what guys will use to kill their truck when it sits so that it can't be stolen or at least can't be driven away. And, most people don't realize that or don't know that there's a kill switch to even look for. And that's another reason why I like the quick wires. So, yeah, I mean, and as far as like connections go, I'm a big fan of weather packs. I know they're getting kind of old. I mean, the hot new thing or CAN bus and I just forgot the name of them. Molex connectors. Those are the new, not new, within the last 10, 15 years for the aftermarket. But we still love the weather packs. They're durable. They're reliable. They seal good. They work good. They're positive connections. So, when we're rewiring, we get rid of the old Packard connectors that they came with factory and go to the weather packs. The only thing I'll say about weather packs is they're not good for high voltage stuff. I used weather packs on my fans in my black truck. And after about 6 months, I burned up one of the connectors, just had too much resistance and got hot and melted the pins. So if you're running, high voltage, high amperage accessory, like weather packs probably aren't for you. There's nothing wrong with the old school spade connectors, the male and female. I don't even know how to describe it. One's flat, the other one's got curled up edges and they nest together when you connect them. Those are fine for a lot of stuff, especially the heat shrink style ones that have the plastic coating over them so that when they're connected, that there's no exposed metal. We use those occasionally on high amperage stuff or when we're just running a single connector, or single disconnect for some accessory. We'll use those instead. Because like I said, the weather packs, they're great, but they do have a tendency to melt stuff when they get hot. So, but I love the weather packs for all of the signal lights, marker lights, all that stuff. Weather packs are great. Great for those. We also do trailer wiring in almost all of our builds, which, you think about that. If you're going to do trailer wiring, you need to put your running lights and your left and right signal lights into your harness before you connect your tail lights and all that, so make sure you sneak those wires in there. Run your trailer brake controller wire in the main harness, your 12 volt constant wire in the harness, and then the ground wire, I usually just screw to the frame, but in the back there somewhere, like the factory did. Loom everything, cover everything, assume no matter what, there's going to be some sort of rub friction issue, Try not to leave loose wires out, and don't use that corrugated loom that used to be all the rage. A corrugated loom it fills up with sand and dirt and creates more corrosion and can cause, friction and rub through issues. So we use the braided loom that, dirt and grit can fall out of, but it's very durable. It keeps the wires safe. So we use a lot of that. Try not to use, the only time we ever use like the vinyl PVC electrical tape, like good old Scotch 88, is under the loom when we're just trying to keep the wires together. Once it's wired and loomed, we use the fuzzy electrical tape. That's seems to be more durable, more sticky, but doesn't leave sticky behind if you have to take it off. And it also just looks a little more cleaner and professional. When I see a truck that's been rewired with corrugated loom and vinyl, electrical tape, I don't know. It makes you wonder if they, are up to date on current electrical stuff, no pun intended. So I don't know. I mean, there is some, you got to keep up with the times and move along. And, maybe here soon we'll graduate out of weather packs and into the new Molex stuff. But I'm not ready to make that jump just yet. Soon, I think we will. But weather packs are still what I would consider modern and more reliable than the old Packards, and definitely more reliable than Scotch locks and whatnot. So, anyway, I think that's about it. Oh, standalone relays. I like to use standalone Bosch 40 amp relays anytime I'm doing wiring, auxiliary lighting or auxiliary accessories like power ports, charging stations. We've got a Travelall that we're wrapping up that has an air compressor hard mounted in it. And, that's run off as a separate relay. They're cheap to get. They're reliable. They're a great way to separate circuits and keep from overloading your fuse panel. You use the fuse panel and that circuit in the fuse panel to trigger the relay, but it actually is powered from another, right off the battery or right off of the battery lug. And that helps take the load off of the wiring itself, separates it out. So, I like those. And then it also helps us run other accessories. Like I use a 12-volt relay to run the Pertronics igniters. They get clean 12-volt power right off the battery, and that seems to help keep them alive better than the low voltage if you're trying to use the factory Scout wiring or the aftermarket ignition source wire. I think the direct 12-volt with a relay is the way to run those Pertronics. That's about the extent of what we do on this aftermarket stuff. I'm sure I forgot something, but no, I just, aftermarket is great. We try to keep the stock stuff alive as long as we can, but you get to the point where they've been so butchered and so beat up that you just need to start from scratch. And, the wiring harness is $315, but by the time you buy all the accessories and all the pizzas and parts and loom and all the stuff, it's a $700 endeavor. And then, multiple weekends or however long you want to do it. It takes us a week, 10 days to do a rewire start to finish. It's so tedious when you start doing the loom and the tape and tying everything up. It adds up quick as far as time goes. So keep that in mind. If, you're not going to rewire your whole Scout in a weekend, at least not very well. So keep that in mind when you're planning out your wiring project. But anyway, I think that does it for me. I appreciate you guys. Thank you always and forever. I'm Dan from Binder Boneyard.